This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China reports drop in new COVID-19 cases, but the coronavirus continues to spread in the West. Democratic Republic of Congo discharges last Ebola patient after 14 days without confirmed cases. And Kenya accuses Somalia's military of breaching her territorial integrity. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts, live in Nairobi. Here's Rama now with all your business headlines.
That's right, Karen. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Airlines are saying that the worst is yet to come as the carriers brace themselves for tougher times amid the coronavirus outbreak. And Egyptian researchers have developed a system that reduces water losses from the River Nile. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. We begin with the latest on the coronavirus epidemic. China added 120 confirmed cases on Tuesday. Almost all were in Hubei province, where the outbreak began in its capital, Wuhan. China's total number of confirmed cases stands at around 80,000. More than half of them have recovered, while nearly 3,000 have died. Beijing has added 3 cases, but some of the worst hit areas in China have seen no new cases. Outside China, more than 13,000 cases have been reported in 76 countries, with more than 200 deaths. Poland, Chile and Argentina reported their first cases on Tuesday. South Korea remains the worst hit country outside China with over 5,600 cases. Italy has over 400 new cases, reaching over 2,500 in total. And Iran is the worst hit country in the Middle East with over 2,900 confirmed cases and 92 deaths. Japan has over 1,000 confirmed cases. Well, elsewhere, an EU official has now tested positive for the novel coronavirus. The public servant who works in Brussels returned from Italy about 10 days ago. Italy is at the centre of Europe's outbreak. The government there has decided to close all schools and universities for 2 weeks. The death toll in Italy now stands at 79. The number of patients has risen to 2,502. Meanwhile, a group of Italian tourists has been put in quarantine in India, with 16 testing positive. It takes India's total number of confirmed cases to 28. The United States now has 125 confirmed cases after 20 more were confirmed. 9 people have died in the United States. Well, the U.S. state of Washington has reported 3 new deaths from COVID-19, bringing the total number of fatalities nationwide to 9. 5 were from a nursing home in Kirkland, a suburb of Seattle. The National Public Health Agency says that it's stepping up efforts in the region to contain the virus, and many schools and businesses have been shut down until further notice. Our correspondent Edis Tiansan reports.
In the United States, the novel coronavirus took its heaviest toll so far here at this nursing home, where several residents died from the infection, while many other residents and at least 1 employee tested positive. The facility is now closed off to visitors, with all residents confined to their rooms, attended by health workers in protective gear. Nearly a quarter of the city's firefighters were also quarantined when some developed flu-like symptoms following a recent visit. And most of these new cases are of unknown origin.
Unfortunately, we are now starting to find more COVID-19 cases in Washington. That appear to be acquired locally here in Washington. And we now know that the virus is actively spreading in some communities here in Washington.
Local residents are taking any precaution they can.
Washing my hand, pretty frequently, and countertop, and that's it.
Spreading, from this place to other places, that's the biggest worry I have.
The sudden increase in the number of those tested positive for the virus here at this Kirkland facility has put the entire community on edge. Now the city and the entire state are in a race to identify other potential infections and prevent what some officials fear could become the first major outbreak here in the U.S. Classes in a suburb north of Seattle were called off for around 22,000 students on Tuesday, so educators could learn how to teach children remotely in case of a major outbreak. After declaring a state of emergency, King County officials are now moving forward with an unusual plan.
We are in final negotiations to purchase a motel in which we can place patients who are in need of isolation and a place to recover.
In the meantime, local authorities are still advising residents to go about their daily lives.
Do the same things you would do any flu season. Wash your hands, cover your coughs. If you're sick, stay home. If your children are sick, keep them home.
But local businesses are already showing signs of slowing down as many people are cutting down on social activities until they learn the true extent of this community spread of the virus. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Kirkland, Washington.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says the COVID-19 outbreak has hit almost all regions of the country. Iran has the highest number of deaths outside China at 92. Freelance reporter Sabas Nazari is in Tehran, and he told us earlier how authorities are trying to curb the spread there.
We have the latest statement from the health ministry in which the death toll has been raised to 92, and we have learned that there are confirmed cases almost in all provinces, a sign that the epidemic is spreading unabated. I mean, the rate is just increasing. It has been increasing in the past few days. The government has announced that the number of those discharged from hospital is also growing, which is now over 500, and this is something that they are relying on as a point of success. But let's not forget that from day one, those figures and reports have faced questioning, and not just from the opposition, rather than from those who are within the ruling elite. In fact, the highest-ranking official was Deputy Parliament Speaker Masoud Pezeshkian, who came out today and raised unprecedented criticism about transparency. He said the government measures have come very late, and they should have listened to experts and put the city of home, the epicenter, under lockdown from the very beginning. Earlier this week, also, the health minister announced the controversial plan about sending 300,000 people in different teams to conduct tests door to door. Now, the plan has been abandoned because it came under enormous fire and was seen as a potential cause of worsening the epidemic. For now, there is much hope invested on the WHO team on the ground with their cargo of 7.5 tons of much-needed tools like masks and gowns and everything, but something that could slow down the cross-infection. But Iranians are also speaking of their own competence these days. We had a fresh report today on a conservative paper saying the Revolutionary Guards are working hard on developing a vaccine that they say will be soon introduced to the market.
South Korea confirmed 516 more cases of the coronavirus on Tuesday. It has the largest outbreak outside China. Meanwhile, the government announced a stimulus package to cushion the economic blow from the epidemic. Tony Cheng has more from Seoul.
More people testing positive for coronavirus here in South Korea every day. 500 people added to the list on Wednesday, taking the total now to more than 5,500. Outside China, that is the largest number of any country in the world. In response, the government has announced a nearly 10 trillion won stimulus package. About a third of that is going to go on emergency medical supplies and relief. That's much needed in the southeastern city of Daegu, the hardest hit city in South Korea, with nearly 2/3 of the cases reported. The government is trying to do everything it can to throw resources into getting people tested so they know the full extent of the problem they're dealing with. but every day the numbers continue to rise. And the rest of that is going to be spent on stimulus, economic stimulus, and that is going to be much needed. People are still out and about. Here in Seoul, the capital, businesses are still operating, people are still going to work, but only when they really need to. And in other parts of the country, you can see the slowdown has been very considerable and is going to have a huge economic impact. And part of that stimulus package is to counteract that impact. Tony Cheng, CGTN, Seoul, South Korea.
Chinese President Xi Jinping says the epidemic control situation in China is improving and production is being restored. Speaking at a meeting of top leaders, Xi Jinping said authorities need to restore the economy and social order and put the country back on track as soon as possible. At the same time, he called for relentless efforts to contain the coronavirus. Instructions for all levels of government were distributed after the meeting, saying efforts should be focused on tracking the origin of the virus, studying pathology, and developing medicines and vaccines. The leadership also said consumption should be encouraged to reverse the halt in business in much of the country. Local governments are being called on to ensure that leading companies quickly restore normal production to stabilize global supply chains. Chinese authorities are encouraging companies to export protective suits to help other countries deal with the new coronavirus.
We are also aware that the epidemic is occurring in some other countries in the world, and they also faced with a shortage of protective suits. China is a major producer of such protective suits, and we encourage the local companies to try their best to satisfy the global needs so that we can make a contribution to the global efforts against the epidemic.
The officials said government support has helped ensure adequate supplies for production of protective suits in China. More than 250,000 are being produced each day, above what's needed in Hubei province. She said the fight against the epidemic is still at a critical stage and production should continue to increase. African countries are putting measures in place to safeguard citizens against the coronavirus. This follows an increase in the number of reported new cases. Many of the countries are tightening controls at their ports of entry, as CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa reports.
In Senegal, the Ministry of Health has announced the discovery of a second case of COVID-19. The victim is a French national who arrived in Senegal on February 29th. He has since been quarantined in a hospital in the capital, Dakar. Meanwhile, pharmacies in Dakar have reportedly run out of face masks and hand sanitizer. In Nigeria, the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Chikwe Ihekweazu, is in self-isolation for 14 days following a recent trip to China. This after one case of coronavirus was confirmed in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos. Meanwhile, a foundation linked to one of Africa's richest men, Nigerian businessman Aliko Dangote, has promised to donate over $500,000 to support the country's efforts to stop the spread of the virus. Algeria has also confirmed 3 new cases of the virus. This brings to 8 the total number of people who tested positive in the country, according to the country's health ministry. The latest cases make Algeria the country with the highest number of cases in Africa. The cabinet in Zimbabwe has announced that travelers visiting the country from nations affected by COVID-19 without valid medical certificates showing that they are not infected will be sent back to the port of entry. This is one of the measures the country is taking to protect its population from the outbreak. And Kenyans risk a fine of $50,000 or a jail term of 2 years for publishing or sharing fake news about the outbreak of the coronavirus. The warning by the government spokesman Cyrus Oguno follows escalating tensions in the country as the virus spreads across the globe. Wilkisa Nyabwa, CGTN.
The increase in the number of new coronavirus cases continues to cause concern globally. However, Professor Bertram Clinton, who is in the Research and Development Director at the University of Western Cape, is urging African countries to implement China's tested methods of combating the virus.
So I think China has done the best that they could have done under circumstances. As virologists, everybody expects these type of zoonotic diseases to jump from animals to humans, but we never know when. So when it does happen, we need to use past experience to really address the issue at the moment. So building hospitals, working on diagnostics, sharing information is very important. And China has done all of that, so it's been as positive as possible under the circumstances.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including Democratic Republic of Congo discharges last Ebola patient after 14 days without confirmed cases. And Kenya accuses Somalia's military of breaching her territorial integrity.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt,
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
For look at some economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
The Democratic Republic of Congo may soon be declared free of Ebola. The country has discharged its last Ebola patient. The World Health Organization has hailed it as a step towards eradicating the disease.
Masika Semida's release from hospital in the city of Beni in DR Congo cannot be overlooked.
I came here very sick. I didn't know if I could be healed. I say thank you very much to the nurses and to God for blessing the nurses. Thank you, because I was really sick.
I have been given a very good gift from DRC, my own continent, Africa. We have now had 2 weeks without a single reported case of Ebola. And there are currently no patients receiving treatment. This is very good news, not just for me, but for the whole world. I remember how the whole world was worried about Ebola. And especially for the thousands of health workers who have sacrificed so much in the fight against Ebola, and for making sure that we are where we are, and 2 weeks without Ebola case.
Officials now have to wait for 42 days without a new case to declare DR Congo Ebola free. The period is equivalent to 2 cycles of 21 days, the maximum incubation period for the virus. This is the second worst Ebola outbreak in history. It was declared in August 2018. For over a year and a half, more than 2,200 people have been killed and over 1,000 infected. Chom Hono, CGTN.
Kenya has issued a stern warning against what it terms as a breach of its territorial integrity and sovereignty by the Somalia National Army. The warning follows a meeting by the National Security Council chaired by President Uhuru Kenyatta on Wednesday. Earlier this week, fighting broke out along the Kenyan border in Mandera between the Somalia National Army and Jubaland forces from the Gedo region. Nairobi also accused Somalia's forces of harassing and destroying property belonging to Kenyan citizens living on the border town. Nairobi has also dismissed claims by Mogadishu that it was interfering in its internal affairs. Meanwhile, after a day of heavy confrontation, calm has returned to towns along a section of the border between Kenya and Somalia. Rival forces from Somalia clashed in a conflict expected to impact relations between Mogadishu and Nairobi. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo reports now from Mogadishu.
The recent clashes along the border come amid strained relations between the central government and Jubaland, one of the country's 5 regional member states. On Monday, the National Army clashed with troops loyal to Jubaland's security minister, who recently fled government custody in Mogadishu. The fighting took place in Belet Hawo, right on the border with Kenya. Authorities in that town are now calling for the exit of Somali forces on Kenyan soil.
The confrontation has caused displacement in both Mandera and Belet Hawo. Shops were burnt down, lives were lost, and dozens of people were injured. The fighting on the border has its challenges. It is unfortunate, and it is best if all the sides come to dialogue.
Last week, Mogadishu deployed hundreds of troops to bolster security along the border, a move widely seen as a military solution to addressing political stalemate in the Jubaland region. The government of Somalia has refused to acknowledge the re-election of this man, Ahmed Mohamed Islam, as Jubaland president. Instead, it wants a repeat election in that state. The UN top diplomat to Somalia, James Swan, last week warned against any escalation of conflict in the Gedo region.
We note recent security deployments in Jubaland's Gedo region have led instead to increased tension. We call on political actors in Jubaland, in particular, to engage in dialogue, to refrain from violence, and to avoid divisions that will be exploited by al-Shabaab.
In a statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has warned Kenya against interfering in its internal affairs, claims the Kenyan government has denied. Analysts now say that the latest standoff along the border is expected to affect Kenya's role in AMISOM, the multinational peacekeeping force tasked with dislodging militant group al-Shabaab in Somalia.
This is the challenge with frontline states. They have their own interests, and this is a classic example. It is wrong for them to be part of AMISOM because they lack neutrality. Somalia should seek international support before this issue gets out of hand.
A group of Kenyan lawmakers from the northeastern region were in Mogadishu last week to meet with Somalia's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo in efforts to seek a lasting solution to security along border towns. For now, stability has returned, but it's unlikely that the matter will be resolved anytime soon. Abdulaziz Billo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
The US says it has launched an airstrike against Taliban fighters to defend Afghan forces. News of the airstrike in the southern province of Helmand came hours after US President Donald Trump told reporters he had had a very good chat with the Taliban political chief. On Saturday, the Taliban signed a deal with Washington on the withdrawal of foreign forces from Afghanistan. Taliban militants have killed at least 20 Afghan soldiers and police in a string of attacks since the signing of the deal. The European Commission has unveiled a climate law to make the EU's 2050 net zero emissions target legally binding. According to the regulation, 2050 will be an EU-wide goal, which raises the possibility that some member states could reduce their emissions to net zero at a later date if other countries achieve it early. However, 17-year-old Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who also attended the meeting, said the law fails to address the next 10 years and it's no more than surrender.
When the EU presents this climate law and net zero by 2050, you indirectly admit surrender, that you are giving up on the Paris Agreement, giving up on your promises, and giving up on doing everything you possibly can to ensure a safe future for your own children.
Well, let's now go to Rama for all the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in business. Airline managers say the worst is yet to come as carriers are bracing for tougher times amid the coronavirus outbreak. And Egyptian researchers have developed a system to reduce water loss through evaporation from the Nile.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to the program. The worst is still yet to come for the airline industry as far as economic damage from the coronavirus outbreak is concerned. That's according to airline executives in Europe. However, they predict the travel demand could stabilize perhaps in the weeks to come. Airlines across the world are battling to get to grips with what they hope will be a short-term rather than a long-term disruption due to the COVID-19 epidemic. Fares are softening already on some routes not directly affected by travel bans. The global travel industry stands to lose at least $46 billion every month if the coronavirus fears continue to lead companies to pull sales staff, consultants and other employees off the road.
We are going to have a very deflated booking environment probably for the next 2 or 3 weeks. The next key, if you like, event is Easter, which is mid-April. Now, I think clearly we have a lot of kind of forward bookings already in the system for the Easter period. Will families who have already booked Easter holidays travel? I think at this point in time, unless it gets much worse, we see no diminution or demand for cancellations or for lack of travel around the Easter period, but it could get worse. And thereafter, May could be a little bit soft, but I think by the time we get to June, July or August, as long as things have settled down, then I think you will see a pretty rapid return to normal travel patterns.
At the same time, the spread of COVID-19 is affecting transportation links, particularly air links between countries. In Egypt, for example, the country is now dealing with the aftermath of having several Middle Eastern nations temporarily barring any visitors from the North African economy. With the details, here's CGTN's Adel Mahrouki.
Over the weekend, Qatar has temporarily banned Egyptians from entry, citing fears of COVID-19. Kuwait is considering taking the same measures against Egyptians, endangering its annual source of $12 billion. Saudi Arabia, the busiest flight destination for Egypt, has frozen issuing tourism and Umrah visas to all countries.
The tourism market gets affected by flight suspensions to destinations, especially when it relates to a touristic country like Egypt, which is a prime hub in the region. We are expecting global losses in flight operations to reach $29 billion. Egypt is no exception.
COVID-19 began by hitting Egypt's flights with China, which was the biggest growing sector in foreign travel in recent years.
The biggest impact so far from the virus is the absence of the Chinese tourists. The number has been growing rapidly in the last couple of years and has been very promising to grow even bigger. The Chinese come here for cultural tourism and they visit temples and museums, so they have been among the high spending categories. That affects the whole economy.
Egypt was planning to resume flights with China this month. Consultations with the WHO and domestic health entities recommended delaying the decision.
With exception to the otherwise growing flights to and from China, Egypt has not been greatly affected yet by the outbreak. Egyptian health authorities have stepped up campaigns to control the spread of the virus. They hope these measures will help protect the country's valuable tourism sector. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Now, Facebook is doing its part to help deal with this coronavirus outbreak. The tech giant CEO Mark Zuckerberg says the company will, for one, give the World Health Organization free advertising on its platform. Facebook will also remove false claims and conspiracy theories around COVID-19, which have been flagged by leading global health organizations. Users who search for the virus on the platform, or rather news about the virus on the platform, will now see a pop-up that directs them to the WHO or a local health authority for the latest information. Those in a country where person-to-person transmission has been reported, on the other hand, will see that information directly in their newsfeed. Researchers at Egypt's Nile University have designed a prototype canal that lowers levels of evaporation to conserve water. Now, if successful, they hope to lower water loss through evaporation from the River Nile. Climate change and the Grand Renaissance Dam's construction in Ethiopia, all combined, could threaten Egypt's water supply. As CGTN's Terry Wangari now reports, the mostly desert country of 100 million is heavily reliant on the Nile for its water supply.
The new canal can be used to boost agriculture or produce energy. By partially covering waterways with plastic floaters equipped with solar panels, engineers working on the project estimate it can save millions in cubic meters worth of water each year.
Our project aims to reduce levels of water evaporation that is wasted due to high temperature, especially in Toshka and Aswan Governorate, which is our case study as we work on Sheikh Zayed Canal in Toshka. By reducing water evaporation levels, we can reduce the amount of wasted water that can be utilized later. We do this by covering the water stream using solar panels, which will be used to generate solar energy. So we cover the water stream with PV cells, photovoltaic cells, to convert solar energy to electric energy.
This solar canal, modeled after the Tosca Valley project in Upper Egypt, took researchers a period of 8 months. It's a network of lakes built in the 1990s that aimed to irrigate large swaths of arid desert for agricultural use. The research also included a study on Lake Nasser, which is a giant artificial lake created by the construction of the Aswan High Dam, which feeds Tosca's lakes.
This project could be implemented over parts of the Nile, especially in parts where there is no navigation, or replace them in a way that does not disrupt navigation. I calculated its implementation on Lake Nasser, and I discovered that if we covered it completely, we would save up to 10 to 15 billion cubic meters of water every year.
Water evaporates due to a multitude of factors, including temperature, air pressure, and the rate of airflow over the body's surface. This has over the years been compounded by rising temperatures due to climate change.
The construction of the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia is one of the problems facing Egypt currently, as well as other countries. Reducing water evaporation levels, if implemented in all canals and other big water streams, would save up to billions of cubic meters of water.
At a relatively low cost, scientists at the university believe if applied to the Nile River, the solar canal can save between 2 and 3 billion cubic meters from the country's existing 55 cubic meter share each year. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
A newly released report on crime around the world shows that economic crimes in South Africa have fallen to their lowest level in nearly a decade. The report is published by the auditing firm PricewaterhouseCoopers, and it shows that accounting fraud, however, has gone up. Here's CGTN's Angela Coppola explaining why.
Despite the South African drop, there is a 4% increase in crimes valued at more than $100 million.
It looks like in total economic crime is decreasing, with only 60% of the respondents saying they suffered an economic crime in the last 24 months. But the big change is that financial statement fraud, accounting fraud has increased from 22 to 34%, which is a very substantial increase. Bribery and corruption is again right near the top of the list. Again, more than 30% of the respondents suffering in that economic crime in the last 24 months.
The survey suggests that levels of management involved in economic criminal activities has also changed from 2 years ago.
The biggest other change is that there's been a sharp increase in the involvement of senior management in committing these economic crimes, where 2 years ago it was 20%, now it's up at 34%. And coupled with that, the value is increasing, with 4% of the respondents suffering losses of more than $100 million US.
South Africa has seen several high-profile economic collapses. Think Steinhoff, the South African-based multinational retailer, and more recently there was Tongaat Hulett, the sugarcane and maize producer, which had its shares suspended 7 months ago due to financial statement accounting fraud. Its CEO and CFO were fired and a new CEO brought in.
It's quite interesting walking into a company where you assume the governance exists. It's only when you start digging and you start realizing, shit, there's nothing, and it actually goes right through the organization.
While high-level business executives are increasingly involved in economic crime, concern has been raised that middle management is also heavily involved, although the amounts are less substantial.
There's so many areas of fraud happening on a daily basis, and that's not been perpetrated by the CEO. It's been perpetrated by a low-level supply chain person and the manager of procurement, etc. So that's where I'm saying we mustn't lose sight of it.
The country's listed companies regulator has administrative powers only, but it does have one very powerful tool.
But the immediate impact is we hit the bank accounts of the perpetrator, and then secondly we assist the prosecuting authorities to prosecute the matter in a criminal way.
It's a truism that if people aren't prosecuted, don't go to jail, or aren't facing huge amounts of fines, they're going to continue doing what they're doing, which is that economic crime. Until we see some prosecutions, it's going to carry on. I'm Angelo Coppola for CG10 in Johannesburg, South Africa.
One last story for you. Brent crude prices have fallen by over 23% in the first 2 months of the year, and that's all due to concerns that the COVID-19 epidemic would sharply cut demand. For Africa's major oil producers, prices where they are at the moment are a significant threat. Nigeria, for example, used an oil price assumption of $57 a barrel for its 2020 budget, 8% higher than current prices. Nigeria has also burned through its foreign currency reserves while defending the naira, and that has seen reserves fall by 12% to $36.7 billion in the 12 months to mid-February. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus now exploring the central bank's options to avoid a devaluation.
Nigeria may be holding out well in its effort at preventing the spread of the coronavirus. Since the country has reported its first case, it's nonetheless feeling the global economic impact of COVID-19. It all boils down to oil. It's Nigeria's main source of revenue and accounts for a significant portion of the country's foreign exchange earnings. But with prices tumbling down below Nigeria's oil budget benchmark price of $57 per barrel, the country is feeling the heat, with fears of another recession.
There is no way we can escape it. It jitters. We are not an inward economy. We depend so much on petrodollars that we sell.
We expect prices to pick up. If they don't pick up, then it will be very significant. The impact will be direct, the deficit will be impacted, and the capacity of government to reduce expenditure is limited.
For about 3 years now, the Nigerian currency has been among the most stable in the world. The country's central bank has been using robust foreign reserves to defend the local currency, but the reserves have been dwindling for months now. And with the drop in global oil prices making accretion to the reserves difficult, there are fears a devaluation might be inevitable.
There is no way we can escape devaluation. The numbers are not adding up. The government is trying their best to make sure that there is no devaluation. But one way or the other, you can't hold it for too long.
The reality is that the economy is now much more dependent on diaspora remittances, much more dependent on that than on oil. So the impact on the foreign exchange itself may not be as high as generally speculated.
At a reserve level of about 38 today, right? And crude price at above 57, 60, 65, sometimes hit 70, we believe that we will be able, and we are saying that we should continue to sustain the existing FX, foreign exchange management and stability that we've seen in the market.
The dynamics have since changed since the central bank governor made that statement in January. Oil prices are now far below the prices the governor quoted there. The reserves have fallen below $38 billion and may continue to fall at least for the short term with the ongoing COVID-19. The next MPC meeting of the central bank is scheduled for later this month. Everyone is waiting to see how the committee reacts to all of this development. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And that's all for business at this hour. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Rana. Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... In Burkina Faso, women overturn traditions in a male-dominated mining industry.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
To Burkina Faso now, and women are turning to the male-dominated industry of mining. From driving lorries to blasting rocks, the women are breaking the mold at the country's gold mines. CGTN's Daniel Artmoy with the details.
After splitting from her husband in 2011, Tene Konate says she struggled to put food on the table for her 2 children. And after hustling, trying to find a job, she landed an opportunity that transformed her life. A job driving a dump truck at the Honde gold mine. Together with other dozens of women, Konate is slowly overturning the long-held tradition in a male-dominated industry.
The first day, I was really scared. Just getting into the dump truck was scary, but little by little, with time, I saw that it's just a machine like any other.
Konate and her female colleagues are beneficiaries of a global push by mining companies to bring more women into an industry that's lagging behind in tackling gender imbalances.
It's not easy to work with men. As a woman, you need to be a tomboy in order for you to work with men. As soon as you cross that gate, you are no longer a woman. We wear the same trousers as men do because we do the same job.
Despite this, the women say working in the mine has changed their lives.
I can't say working hasn't changed something in my life. It has changed everything. I don't know how to say it, but before, when I was in my house, I didn't even have a chair like this one. I used to sit on a stool. But today here I am, sitting in a sofa. I look at the TV and I'm comfortable. I eat what I want. The mine has changed a lot, changed everything in my life. I can see that.
The world's largest mining company, BHP Billiton, has set a target for a gender-balanced workforce by 2025 in the mining industry. And according to a report by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development published in 2018, Burkina Faso's government also said it's committed to promote gender equality through education, health and political participation. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
All the sport coming up for you after the break, including Tanzania to send 3 athletes to the Singapore 2020 Para-Swimming World Series.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.